This video is for educational and informational purposes only. All information is based on public sources and news reports. This is not legal advice, not political advice, and does not create any attorney-client relationship. We have no intention to harm or defame any person or organization. Always verify facts from multiple official and reliable sources. Fair use applies to any clips shown. Hey everyone, can you believe the Prime Minister of Canada stood on the world stage in January 2026 and basically said the entire global order that America helped build is now in a full-blown rupture and that middle powers like Canada need to team up to protect themselves? Guys, welcome back to American Politics Today. In this video, we are breaking down one of the most talked about moments in international relations this year. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney gave a powerful speech at Davos calling out a rupture in the world order, pushed for middle powers to band together, and it did not sit well. With President Trump fired back hard, there was a tense phone call, and now there are real questions about trade, tariffs, and how this affects everyday Americans like you and me. We are going to walk through the exact words, the timeline, the reactions, the economic numbers, and why this matters for your wallet, your job, and America's place in the world in 2026. Stick around because by the end you will see the full picture and why this story is bigger than just two leaders talking tough. Alright guys, let me paint the picture for you step by step. It is January 20th, 2026 at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The snow is falling, world leaders are gathered, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney steps up to the podium for a special address. He does not mention President Trump by name, but everyone in the room knows exactly who he is talking about. Carney looks straight into the camera and says the world is in the middle of a rupture, not a transition. He calls the old rules-based order a pleasant fiction that no longer works. He talks about great powers using tariffs as weapons and economic integration as coercion, and then he drops the big line that goes viral around the world: middle powers must act together because if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. The speech gets a standing ovation. Within minutes, it is all over social media and news channels. Headlines scream Carney declares end of us-led order. But wait, the real twist comes now. The very next day, January 21st, President Trump takes the same stage in Davos and responds directly. He calls out Carney by name and says, quote, "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements." Trump adds that Canada gets a lot of freebies from America and should be grateful. The room goes quiet, reporters start typing furiously, and just like that, two close allies are publicly clashing in front of the entire world. Now imagine this: you are an American factory worker in Michigan who relies on trade with Canada for your paycheck, or maybe you are a Canadian farmer shipping goods south. Suddenly, the leaders of your two countries are trading sharp words on the global stage. That is how fast this story went from a speech to a full-blown diplomatic moment. But the timeline does not stop there. A few days later, on January 27th, reports come out that Trump called Carney on the phone. According to people close to the call, Carney told the president, "I meant what I said in Davos." He did not back down. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had claimed Carney walked it back aggressively. But Carney told reporters, to be absolutely clear, "I meant every word." That phone call drama only added fuel to the fire. What Carney actually said word for word. Let me explain this in simple words so everyone understands exactly what happened. In his 30-minute speech, Prime Minister Carney started in French and then switched to English. He said the world order that worked for decades is now broken. He used the word rupture many times. He said, "We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition." He talked about how great powers are using economic tools like tariffs and supply chains as weapons. He pointed out that institutions like the World Trade Organization and the United Nations are under pressure. And then he gave his big solution. Middle powers like Canada, Australia, Japan, and others should work together to protect their interests. He said, "Middle powers must act together because if you are not at the table, you are on the menu." Carney never named the United States or President Trump once, but the timing was clear. This was right before Trump arrived in Davos. Public sources like the World Economic Forum website, BBC, New York Times, and Politico all have the full transcript and video. No one disputes what he said. The speech was careful, measured, and delivered. With confidence, it got a standing ovation from the audience. Carney later told reporters he stands by every word. Here is the crazy part. For decades, Canada has been America's closest trading partner. We share the longest border in the world. Billions of dollars cross that border every single day. So when the Canadian leader stands up and says the old system is over, it feels personal to a lot of people on both sides of the border. But Carney was not attacking America. He was saying the world has changed and Canada needs to adapt. That is the simple truth behind his words. You won't believe what happened next. President Trump's response the following day turned the story into front-page news everywhere. Trump's direct response and the Canada Lives Because of Us line. President Trump takes the stage on January 21st and does not hold back. He looks out at the same crowd and says Canada should be grateful because, in his words, Canada lives because of the United States. He reminds everyone that America provides security, trade, advantages, and defense for Canada. He tells Carney directly, "Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements." He adds that Canada gets a lot of freebies and should stop complaining. The room reacts with some gasps and some applause. Reporters immediately connect it to Carney's speech from the day before. Trump's team later says the president was just stating facts about the close relationship and the burden the United States carries. Public sources like the New York Times, BBC, and CBC all quote the exact line. Within hours, Trump has made similar points about allies before, but naming Carney and using the words "Canada lives because of the United States" made it personal. Now imagine this scenario. You are sitting in Toronto watching the news and hear the leader of your biggest trading partner say your country only exists because of America. Or you are in Detroit and hear Canada's leader saying the old order that protected that trade is dead. Both sides feel the sting. That is why the moment spread so fast. But wait, the real human side comes when we look at the numbers. The US-Canada trade relationship is worth over $700 billion a year. Millions of American jobs depend on selling to Canada. Millions of Canadian jobs depend on selling to us. So when leaders start trading sharp words, people start worrying about their paychecks. The phone call drama that followed. A few days after the speeches, on January 27th, news breaks that President Trump called Prime Minister Carney. According to Carney's team, the conversation was positive and covered many topics. But then Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent goes on Fox News and says Carney aggressively walked back some of his Davos comments during the call. Carney immediately pushes back. He tells reporters on Parliament Hill to be absolutely clear, "And I said this to the president. I meant what I said in Davos." He says he did not back down at all. That back and forth becomes its own story. Canadian ministers confirm the call happened and that Carney stood firm. American officials say the conversation was constructive. No one releases the full transcript, but the public messages are clear. Carney refuses to apologize or soften his words. Trump's side keeps emphasizing that Canada benefits hugely from the relationship with America. Here is a light way to look at it without taking sides. It is like two neighbors who have lived next to each other for decades suddenly having a loud disagreement in the front yard. Everyone on the street hears it. Some neighbors pick sides, others just hope the fence stays up. That is basically what happened between Washington and Ottawa in late January 2026. The phone call drama showed something important. Even when things get tense, the two countries still talk. They still need each other. But the trust that used to be automatic is now being tested in public. What exactly is this middle powers push Carney is talking about? Let me break this down super simply because this is the part a lot of people are still confused about. Carney is saying that the world used to have one big leader, the United States, keeping things stable. That system is now changing. Big powers like the US and China are competing hard. Smaller and medium countries like Canada cannot just hide behind the old rules anymore. So his solution is for countries in the middle like Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and some European nations to team up, share trade deals, and protect each other from economic pressure. He calls it building strategic autonomy while still keeping values like human rights and democracy. In his speech, he says middle powers are not powerless. They can work together to make sure they are at the table instead of on the menu. After Davos, Carney visited Australia in March 2026 and gave similar messages there. He is actively building these new connections. Now, here is a what-if scenario to think about. Imagine if Canada signs big new trade deals with Japan and the European Union and reduces its reliance on the US market just a little bit. American companies might lose some sales, but Canadian businesses might feel more secure. On the flip side, if the US and Canada stay super close, both sides save money on shipping and tariffs. Both ideas have pros and cons. Carney is betting on the middle powers team-up idea. Public sources like the Carnegie Endowment and the Lowy Institute have written long analyses saying this is a real shift in how middle countries are thinking in 2026. It is not anti-American, it is about survival in a more competitive world. You won't believe how fast this idea spread. Within weeks, other leaders started using similar language. The middle powers conversation is now happening in parliaments from Ottawa to Tokyo. The economic fallout and what it means for American wallets. Let's get practical now, because this is the part that hits home for everyday Americans. The words in Davos and the phone call did not happen in a vacuum. They came during ongoing trade tensions. The US has tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and other goods. Canada has responded with its own measures. USMCA, the big trade agreement, is up for review soon. When leaders trade public jabs, markets get nervous. Gas prices, car parts, groceries, lumber for houses, a lot of what we buy involves Canada. If trade slows down even a little, costs can go up. Some experts say the rhetoric alone added uncertainty that affects investment and jobs on both sides of the border. But here is the simple truth. The US and Canada still do more trade with each other than almost any other pair of countries. That relationship has survived tough times before. Many analysts believe both sides will eventually sit down and work things out because the economic pain of a real breakup would be too high for everyone. Still, the fallout is real. Some American farmers worry about losing Canadian buyers. Some Canadian energy companies worry about US policy changes. The phone call and the speeches reminded everyone that words from leaders can move markets and affect paychecks. A quick history lesson on US-Canada relations. To understand why this moment feels so big, we have to look back just a little. The United States and Canada have been allies through 2 world wars, the Cold War, and every major crisis since. We share the world's longest undefended border. We fought together in Afghanistan. We trade more than $1 trillion worth of goods and services every year. Presidents and prime ministers have had disagreements before, but they usually kept them private. This time, the disagreement played out on the biggest stage in the world, that is new. Carney's speech and Trump's reply showed that the old way of handling things quietly is changing. Some people think that is healthy because it forces honest conversations. Others worry it weakens the special relationship that has benefited both countries. For generations, reactions from other countries and the bigger picture. The story did not stay between Washington and Ottawa. Leaders in Europe, Australia, and Asia watched closely. Many middle power countries quietly agreed with parts of Carney's message. Australia welcomed Carney warmly in March and talked about new partnerships. European officials said the speech was brave. At the same time, some US allies said they still value the strong relationship with America and do not want to pick sides. The United Nations and World Trade Organization also took notice because Carney criticized how those institutions are struggling. The whole episode became a symbol of how the post-World War II order is being tested in 2026. Now, here is a light observation. It is like watching a big family dinner where one relative stands up and says the old family rules no longer work and everyone needs to team up differently. Some family members cheer, others get defensive, and everyone wonders what happens at the next holiday. Long-term questions and what happens next. So where does this leave us in March 2026 and beyond? Carney continues to push for new trade deals and middle power cooperation. Trump continues to emphasize that America will put its own interests first. Trade talks are ongoing. The USMCA review is coming. Markets are watching every word. Many experts believe this tension could lead to stronger negotiations and better deals for both sides. Some people think it might push Canada to diversify faster and reduce dependence on the US market. No one knows the final chapter yet, but the conversation is out in the open analysis section. So what does all of this really mean for America, for regular people, and maybe even for the 2026 midterms? Many experts believe moments like this show how interconnected our economies and security really are. Some people think President Trump's strong response reminds allies that the United States expects gratitude and fairness. Others worry that public clashes like this can create uncertainty that raises costs for families on both sides of the border. For everyday Americans, it matters because stable trade with Canada keeps prices lower on cars, energy, food, and building materials. If the relationship stays strong, we all benefit. If it gets rockier, some prices might rise and some jobs could feel pressure. No one can predict exactly what will happen, but the speeches and the phone call have already made everyone pay closer attention to the numbers behind the relationship. Big reveal time, guys. Here is the simple truth after everything we just walked through. In January 2026 at Davos, Prime Minister Mark Carney declared that the global order is in the middle of a rupture and called on middle powers to work together. President Trump responded the next day by saying Canada lives because of the United States and should. Remember that? A phone call followed where Carney stood by his words. The economic relationship between our two countries is still massive and beneficial for millions of Americans and Canadians, but the public exchange showed that old assumptions are being tested. The story reminds us that even the closest allies can disagree in public. When the world changes, the question for all of us is how leaders on both sides turn this tension into stronger deals that actually help regular people instead of creating more uncertainty. Do you think this kind of public disagreement between the US and Canada will affect trade, jobs, or even the 2026 midterms here at home? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing what you think. If you learned something new today, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss an update when big stories like this break down. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Stay informed and stay awesome.